Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone on the call, and to my special guests, Iqbal, Malhotra, and Maroof, Raza. Abhinav, thanks for putting this all together. That's a pretty good initiative that Vyana has taken, and I really like the fact that you try and bring different speakers together on a platform. And I'm really grateful for you having chosen me to speak to these two gentlemen who are perhaps India's intellectual beacons, so to speak, on a topic which is very sensitive, which is about national security and geostrategic issues. And the last 2 days, I spent a lot of time reading books that the two gentlemen have written. And it's such a vast treasure of, it's a reservoir of knowledge and back history on issues such as Kashmir, China, India, and all the complications around it. So I'm not going to spend a lot of my end. I'm going to immediately introduce two of my co-panelists, Iqbal Chand Malhotra and Maroof Raza. Both of them, I'm sure you all very often on TV, Strategic Affairs, Times, and one of India's leading lights on matters of national security. And Iqbal Malhotra, well, I think he's done eons service to India by having over 500 hours of documentary time, predominantly for Rupert Murdoch, and then he's built many series for Discovery, etc. And both these gentlemen have come together on matters that are extremely sensitive. So what I'm going to do is kind of quickly call Maroof in. And Maroof, you want to just kick off the entire discussion that we have over the next 60 odd minutes by giving us your background and just a quick synopsis of, for the public, what is it that you're seeing in this entire trioca between the Kashmir issue, India, China, and your first views, and then I'll quickly dive into a question with Iqbal. So Maroof, we can start off with you.
Okay, thanks, Karan. There are many elements to this current crisis, but me being the ultimate optimist, I look at the crisis having, notwithstanding the loss of 20 brave men, I look at the crisis having actually initiated lots of new elements and lots of new verticals in our thinking, which were there in academic and strategic affairs circles, but the government was constantly in a state of denial. Let me just bring you a small anecdote from the times of the Sumdrongchu standoff with the Chinese in 1986-87, and when General Sundarji deployed Indian troops in a kind of Chinese incursion, which is pretty habitual if you go back into the history of Sino-Indian relations, on which I'm working at a book now on boundary disputes. And you'll find they do it every few years. And as Iqbal will also concur, he was telling us earlier, this is just to test our resolve. And if you don't respond, then they assume what is unoccupied should be taken. And then over a period of time, they turn around, look at you with a poker face to say, we've always been there, which is really the story of Aksai Chin, that from the 1950s onwards. But what happened is that the government of India was saddled with a policy of, don't upset the Chinese. It's a kind of hangover of the Nehruvian era. And we continue to make a merit out of this nonsense that we've managed to keep a boundary with China unsettled, but without firing a shot. Now, it defies logic that you either have an unsettled boundary and go out and settle it, or you accept the unsettled status and then don't make a song and dance about it, or you then go and take what you believe is yours. And lots of politicians, including the current dispensation, keep making these statements that, Indian territory will not be given. But then we have to understand, is Aksai Chin Indian territory or not? If it wasn't Indian territory, then what are you fighting about? If it is Indian territory, then why are you making statements to say Indian territory would not be given? So there is the political element. Then there is the, of course, very clearly the military dimension, and I'll expound on it a bit later because I don't want to make the introduction too long. But quite clearly, the military dimension is not new to the military. The military has been prepared for all this. And one of the reasons why the Indian Army, which having had such a fantastic track record in World War I and World War II, was it not for them, the British would have lost those wars. But they went and had got such a drubbing in 62. The reason was they were not allowed to fight. So if you don't allow your army to fight, then you take a Nehruvian approach that the police is good enough for the borders, which is what Nehru told the army then in the 50s. But the third element is that this has exposed the limits of Indian diplomacy. That diplomacy which you thought from the Krishna era onwards that you could talk the Chinese out of believing your line of thought doesn't work anymore. And it is not Indian diplomacy per se which is getting a lot of foreign powers to come in and do these naval exercises in the Indian Ocean. But more importantly, it is the opportunities that India offers to every major country in the world in terms of business, in terms of economy, and it kind of overlaps into the security space. And then finally, and most importantly, we must understand that future conflicts are not going to be about these many kilometers are yours and these are mine. These conflicts are going to involve every level of national resource. That's what the Chinese call comprehensive national power, CNP. So if you're willing to go into that realm and let a territorial dispute, which some people would argue is just a few kilometers here and there, and does it really require a war? Then you have to bring into play all your national resources. And India, though smaller than China in multiple factors, whether it's the GDP, the economy, military investments, etc. When China takes on India in, God forbid, if this escalates into a bigger conflict, then China doesn't have the freedom to withdraw all its assets from everywhere and put it against India. So please understand, China has borders with 14 countries, bad relations with 18 countries, and China is not exactly, as in 1962, going to be in a position to withdraw its assets facing Taiwan, withdraw its assets facing the other high seas, South China Sea, etc., and then try and teach India a lesson. That is behind us. The point at issue is, what level of scale up are we going to take? And if we are going to take a scale up, what for? And that, I think, your discussion will lead us to.
The excellent start, Maroof. Thanks so much for getting in the military, political, and diplomatic aspect to this entire entanglement for now. And it's a perfect time to get in our next speaker, which is Iqbal Malhotra, on the issue which is sometimes overlooked, the economic aspect of this entire episode. And Iqbal, may I request you to step in and share with us something that I've also read in the book that you all have written together about the Tarim Basin and the Soviet angle, etc., and how it started with uranium, and perhaps it's about water resources now, this entire embargo around the economic aspect of issues that the country faces. So Iqbal, if you could throw some light on that, and that will cover the entire military, political, diplomatic, and economic issues, and give a proper angle to the entire effect.
Okay, what I'll do is that I'll start from the present and I'll go back into the past.
Sure.
You see, in order to understand the crisis that we are facing, we have to understand the existential crisis that China is currently facing. Now, under Xi Jinping, China has set itself the target of becoming the world's #1 superpower by 2050, which is going to be the 100th anniversary of the revolution in China. Now, they have got a $1.3 trillion, not billion, but $1 trillion program called the New Infrastructure Initiative to seize the lead from the US in 5G technologies. And at the core of this program is the company Huawei and its ultra secret division called High Silicon, which was created 16 years ago. Now, the US in May this year passed an order by the US Department of Commerce that now prohibits the sale of any microprocessors, because microprocessors run everything from mobile phones to satellites. And without microprocessors, the sensors, even medical equipment doesn't work. Nothing works today. Not even your fridges is going to work. So the sale of high-end microprocessors to China is banned. Now the 48% of the world's high-end microprocessors that are going to underpin this entire initiative of the New Infrastructure Initiative are manufactured in Taiwan by one company called the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. They've got 13 foundries and they've got abundant water because Taiwan is a water surplus country, unlike China, which is a water deficit country. Now the Chinese threatened the Taiwanese that if you stick to this ban, then we will destroy your foundries. And in fact, two of their companies, which are based in mainland China, two of their foundries based in mainland China, have been nationalized by the Chinese government. People don't know about this. So what's happening now is that the Taiwanese then turned to the Americans and said, are you going to bail us out, or we are going to yield before the Chinese? So the Americans sent two carrier battle groups, the USS Nimitz and the USS Ronald Reagan, to the South China Sea, to the complement of about 25 ships and submarines and about 300 fighter aircraft. The Chinese are planning a series of naval exercises in the middle of August in the South China Sea off the island of Hainan. And analysts feel that that is going to be the pretext to launch an attack on Taiwan. And they figure that if we can't have those foundries, then nobody can have them, and we will destroy them, because then it will set the US entire defense initiative back at least 3-4 years. Because even though the Taiwanese are going to set up a new foundry in Arizona, it's only going to have 3% of the Taiwanese capacity, and it's going to take another 4 years to go on stream. So August is a crucial month. And there's a $500 billion rollout that Huawei is engaged in to create 5G networks for 90 mobile companies all over the world. This entire rollout is in question, because they are not going to get any more microprocessors from TSMC, and the inventory is about 1 year's stock. Now, the US government is by now committed to destroying Huawei and completely shutting it down. So the choice between the Chinese face is that either we make the peace with the US and accept the fact that we will have to surrender many things and accept their dominance over us, or we go to war. Now, microprocessors require water, and China is a water deficit country, and the water that they're eyeing is the water in Ladakh, which flows from Ladakh into Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And in the month of May, 2 months ago, they signed a deal to fund two of these major dams in POK. One is called the Bunji Dam, and the other the Daimar Basha Dam in Skardu and Gilgit, because global warming has led to glacial melt. And this glacial melt is causing a surge in the water in the Changchemo, in the Shayok River, in the Nubra River, in the Galwan River, which are tributaries of the Indus. And this surge is, they want to take advantage of this, and they want to generate electricity. And they also have a vast storage capacity, because they're shifting their new microprocessor foundries to Western China and Xinjiang. And some people speculate they might even be embedded in the mountains in the Karakorams. So that's the dynamic issue. It's not just the issue of India and China, but it's a global issue that has an aspect that impinges on us. Now, we are intertwined with the Chinese economically. We have a $50 billion trade deficit, and we have let our consumer industries shut down over the last 20 years because it's cheaper to buy from China. Now, we can't extricate ourselves immediately, but we are locked in this embrace. Notwithstanding that fact, we have to defend our territory, and we have to defend our water resources. For example, the Siachen Glacier, which is also under threat from a joint Sino-Pak attack, holds 100 million acre feet of water, which is enough to satisfy the water needs of the city of Delhi for 56 years. Yeah, the fresh water over there. So we are compelled to defend ourselves. And interestingly, if you look at why did China come into Aksai Chin, it's a long story, but to make it short, the Cold War between the West and the Soviet Union in 1945-47 compelled the British to set up 2 to 3 seismic and acoustic monitoring stations to monitor the Russian nuclear tests. If you go to screen share on this map that I sent you of the Tarim Basin and put it on for the viewers, we will be...
I think Abhinav can do that.
This is the one?
This is the one. I'm just going to enlarge it here, and the viewers can see it. Now, this map shows you this of the Taklamakan Desert, and it says Tarim there, which is the Tarim River. And if you look south, you'll find Hotan, and then you'll find the Karkash. And if you enlarge this map further, you'll find that the Karkash River originates in Aksai Chin. Now, this Karkash River flows into the Tarim River. And there's another river which is called Yarkant, which starts as the Shaksgam River, and it flows north also into the Tarim River. Now, if you turn to the eastern part of this map, you will see Lok Nor over there, which is the Chinese nuclear testing facility. And the river, the Tarim River flows, the eastern part flows into Lok Nor, and the western part goes towards Kashgar. Now, this Kashgar area is a very fertile area. And the Karkash River and the Shaksgam River were vital for the survival of this entire region, because this Lok Nor area was going to become radioactive. In fact, the lake has become radioactive after the Chinese nuclear test in 1964. Now, if you just go to the north of this map, you will see a place called Urumqi, right, in Xinjiang. Now, this Urumqi, about 800 kilometers from Urumqi in what was originally Soviet Kazakhstan, the Russians had this nuclear station, this nuclear testing site called Semipalatinsk. And the British were monitoring this site because they had to learn from the Russian experience how to make the bomb themselves. And Stalin was actually, he was mortified about this Indian army detachment in Gartok in Tibet, which if you enlarge the map, you'll see it's just near this pink shaded area. Now, this Gartok is in Western Tibet. And Gartok had a company of Indian army troops under the command of a major. In fact, I interviewed for one of my films, the last commander was a Major Atre. And Major Atre and his detachment left Tibet in 1954 when the Panchsheel Agreement was signed. So Stalin never told Mao that this entire Tarim Basin and Aksai Chin, which is part of the same geographical structure, contains uranium, thorium, beryllium, molybdenum, petroleum, and gold. And he wanted to mine this. So in December 1949, when Mao went to Moscow to sign a deal with Stalin to rearm China and equip it to defend itself against the Americans, and Mao had some expansionist designs and plans, Stalin convinced Mao to send his troops in to Aksai Chin and grab hold of it, because he said that this will be the route to Tibet. Now, funnily enough, they keep on saying that this highway G219 was the reason why the Chinese went into Aksai Chin, but I completely debunked that hypothesis, because the highway 219 used to go up to Gartok. Now, Gartok is at the western extremity of Tibet. It's about 1,200 kilometers by road. I've driven from there to, in fact, that is about 1,400 kilometers from Lhasa. And it's hardly 5% of the Tibetan population was living in Western Tibet. So what was the advantage for the Chinese to get into Western Tibet when all the action was in the center and in the east? So this
primarily to keep the Indians away.
Keep the Indians away, and also to exploit the mineral resources of this area and to appropriate the water of the Karkash River. So that's why they came in and they built up this entire fiction. And Mr. Nehru used to say that not a blade of grass grows in Aksai Chin, but it's mineral rich, because this Karkash River is a glacial fed river, and during the winter it freezes up and it forms a passageway into Xinjiang, and it's got minerals all along the riverbed.
So Iqbal, it's quite fascinating. On one end, it started with the Soviets wanting the uranium for their nuclear program, countered by the British in the past. And now, as we speak, it's about water. So at all points in time, either it's been minerals or it's been water, but it at the end of it all boils down to economics and the costs of capital for these countries. Maroof, can I just bring you in very quickly on this one? And you mentioned this point about military, political, diplomatic countermeasures that the Indians can take. Can you expand on that a bit? And can you share with the audience, what is it that you had in mind? What is it that you're referring to? Because what we see as civilians is what we see on TV, but as an observer and as someone who's deeply embedded in this entire issue, what is your take on the military, political, and diplomatic countermeasures that you were suggesting?
You see, let's start with the military countermeasures. If they are effective enough, then you really don't have to go into the other two areas in great depth. The military countermeasures are the following. One is that you can actually continue to take territory and give them surprises, not just in Aksai Chin, but also across the other boundary which China disputes, which is the McMahon line, which is near Arunachal and that part of Northeast India. Now, how this whole thing works is, even if you now look closely at pictures of Chinese military deployment when they've come forward, it is not as though every Chinese soldier is standing shoulder to shoulder in the areas that they have occupied. The military all over the world works on certain principles of domination by patrolling and by fire. And you dominate by fire by occupying heights which allow you and give your weapons a certain range of stalling enemy activity wherever they try and come into territory you claim as your own. As Iqbal has brought out, it is very clear now that the government being so obsessed with the COVID and their approach to dealing with COVID, that they restricted what at that time of the year when the Chinese buildup was taking place, April, May, is the time of the year when every year those formations, a formation is a brigade upwards, where brigade is about 2,500 to 3,500 men, depending on how much you want to strengthen it. And a division is about anything from 8,000 to 10,000 men. So the formations there, the brigades and the divisions, were not allowed to carry out the op alerts. So the op alerts is where you go into all your tactical positions in the light of scenarios that are already discussed on SAN models. Iqbal mentioned about SAN models, but I mean the Indian Army also loves to do SAN models and does it all the time. So, you know, you have features were made out into a large room like a aircraft shed or something. And there you have rivers and nalas and hills and everything. And you discuss, if I position my troops here, what all areas will I cover, etc. Now, likewise, now this is the defensive mode. The offensive mode is you have also studied the enemy's patterns of deployments, the opportunities he might be exploiting, and as Chinese have exploited now. So when they do, what do? You can do three things immediately, which I'm surprised we didn't do, which obviously was waiting political clearance. One is there are gaps between what they've occupied and what you occupy. You move in patrols and troops through those gaps and go behind them, put in a patrol there for 2 to 3 weeks and, you know, put them under pressure and say, you either pull back or my men start shooting at you. Sundarji did that in Sundarongchu and the Chinese pulled back. It left to the politicians and diplomats, it would have never happened. And interestingly, when Rajiv Gandhi went to Beijing in 1988, after the Sundarongchu pull off, which Rajiv initially was trying to put General Sundarji under pressure to say pull back, and it's there on the internet if you type Sundarongchu. And Sundarji said, in that case, Prime Minister, please look for a replacement for me. They didn't have to look for a replacement because the Chinese pulled back. And more so, when Rajiv went to China in 88, the Chinese actually talked to him with much greater respect than they have in the past talked to Indian Prime Ministers with. But then we are good at frittering away opportunities, so we frittered that away. So what do you do now? How do you show that, you know, the assertions that Modi and his government makes, how do you show you mean business? You still have the chance to surround them in certain areas and say, okay, you pull back or we cut off your lines of support. Second thing is, there are certain gaps and areas in the other part of the boundary, which is McMahon line. And you move in troops there. It's called a revolving door strategy. That means we've gone through the other part of the revolving door. You pull back from here, we pull back from there. Or we hold on to what we have, you hold on to what you have. Now, you want to scale it up further? You want to go into an escalation match? Our boys have shown they are more brutal than yours. So 20 men of ours died. We killed anything up to 40 to 100, depending on which statement you go by. And we'll kill more. We've done that in Nathula in 67, where we killed many more, I think in multiples of 4 times than what they killed amongst our troops. But our boys are looking for an opportunity to fight. They're battle hardened. They're probably the only army in the world since 1954 which has been battling this, that, and the other. China has only gone in for one battle against the Vietnamese in 79, and they got a bloody nose. So they're not good soldiers. They come from one-child families, so they don't want to die. Our guys look for an opportunity to die because it has multiple effects in the regiment, in their gaon, in their gharana, everywhere. So don't discount our ability to take tough shots. And China has to be told that. 3, what else can you do? You can actually use your maritime options, which I've just done a show on latitude this morning. It'll come again tomorrow morning at 9:30 on Times Now, where I've explored the whole set of maritime options, which is really a strong point. So if you want de-escalation on the land on top, stop thinking territorially. You have moved in there, you moved in and blocked the Straits of Malacca, and China is going to pull back from there quickly. Because I remember when Xi Jinping came to meet Modi and was sitting on a jhula with him in Ahmedabad, and then the talks really didn't go further. You know, Modi apparently told him that, you know, I can't talk any further with you because I got a toothache. And the toothache is that your chaps have again moved into Chumar, Tepsang, and all those areas along Exai Chin. So you pull back, then I start talking. And Xi Jinping actually gave him an assurance that I go back, and by midnight that night, he gave a call to Modi's office, and I know it from the horse's mouth, actually, let me reinforce, that the call came to say, check out, we've pulled back. Now let's start talking. So they are wanting attention, they are wanting a kind of settlement. Interestingly, I mean, all of us, who you would also be aware, that, you know, China has made proposals to us in the past that,
for border
settlement, do a territorial swap. And the fact is, there is no other solution to the territorial problem unless you're willing for a swap. For a moment, just abandon your chest thumping, you know, jingoistic nationalism to say every inch of our territory is ours. Did you guys know that until some documentaries were made, including my own Tales of Valor, that something called Rezangla existed, where, you know, 110 men all died with bullets in their front, but killed about 700-800 Chinese? Did you know something called, you know, Namkachu existed? Most people don't know. They are parts of territory we've gone out to defend. So if you really want to get a grip on India, first look at India's map and get realistic. The other issue is, what do you do economically? What do you do diplomatically? Diplomatically, I think we are going the phone and we are generally plugged in with everybody. But please understand, you know, for the diplomatic challenges India has, we have too small a diplomatic force. You know, India's diplomatic corps is smaller than that of Singapore, and you want to be a world power. Why? Because the elitist foreign service feels they are God's own children. They pass that one great exam, and no man can be bright enough to exchange diplomatic notes with them because he didn't pass that exam. So nobody else is allowed into the system, whether directly or indirectly, to negotiate from India at multiple levels. You can't be, the era of jacks of all is gone. You can't be good at dealing with EU and trade and dealing with China and land boundary issues. You have to have specialities. And finally, most importantly, is the trade element. I mean, can you win China away from your world? I mean, if you're willing, not me, but your driver and your cook and, you know, your restaurant waiter, if everyone's waiting and willing in the name of Aksai Chin to have cell phones that cost twice or thrice the amount, because 90% of the cell phone industry is controlled by China, the one which really comes to India, televisions, computers, even pharmaceuticals, ibuprofen, paracetamol, penicillin, not paracetamol. I mean, medicines, they control 85 to 92% of virtually all the essentials. So are you willing to go that route for what Iqbal rightly said, that not a blade of grass grows where they are sitting? This point was brought up to Nehru in the parliament, and Nehru said not a blade of grass grows there. So somebody got up and said, Panditji, not a blade of grass grows, many a bald head. Are you willing to give the bald head away?
That was the Jansang MP, Mahavir Tyagi.
Yeah, so the point is that we should be able to do a realistic assessment of what you can give away, what you should hold, and how much more you should put lives at stake. I mean, at the cost of sounding, some upsetting many sentiments, Colonel Babu and his men made a tactical mistake. That's why they died. Whatever the Chinese deceit, whatever the ambush, I mean, I've done my homework. They should not have gone in such small numbers to verify on the ground where the Chinese were. There are various other ways of verifying. And of course, it's been, like Kargil, a major intelligence fiasco. But the intelligence agencies in India are very good at diverting the blame to the army. If the army could do everything, then let's wrap up RAW, let's wrap up IB, put everything under the CDS and the army. You don't need those people, and then you make heads roll. But tell me, when was the last time a head rolled in India from the Chinese incursions in the 50s in Aksai Chin? Ghulanat Malik, the IB chief for a long time and then became national security chief, was man of all answers to Nehru's questions on security. He didn't roll. I mean, there's much more on him that is coming out in my book and so many other books. Then after Kargil, intelligence heads didn't roll. After 26/11, intelligence heads did roll. And even now, what will they? They will just post them to another department. That is the highest punishment that you can give to the bureaucracy. In the military, you go home. I mean, so we need to have, I just finished writing this morning a security paper for IIC, but the fact is we need to have new structures in place and not have generalist bodies doing this, that, and everything. Then you have generalist responses. China has one command which faces us from Aksai Chin to Myanmar. Is known as the Chinese Western Theater Command. You know, we have two military commands facing China north of Nepal and one military command facing China in the Eastern Command. We have two air commands. You have a naval command, at least one, which is dealing from Vizag in the Bay of Bengal and beyond. Then you have a Tri-Services Command in Andamans. So you have multiple forces. But believe me, I mean, there's a, fate has its own way of repaying India with its foolishness, for its foolishness. And all these commands can actually become an advantage if you know how to employ them. That the Northern Command and the Western Command operate independent of each other, as army commands are, and air commands are also. So what you don't have to have the same insecurities of the same commander at the north and in the east. The problem is, as it narrows up to the top, there are singular people responsible, and their responses would define how you operate in the north and in the west. Left to the military commanders, they would have sorted this problem out, I think, a month ago.
So this gets me into a very quick question for both Iqbal and for you, Maroof. As a viewer, I would think that what I read and what I see is that the political dispensation has left the decision to the military commanders on the ground. Or at least that's what we are told.
So it is said.
So it is said. Exactly. So for the viewers on this call, how would you and Iqbal kind of sum it up for us in terms of what is being told to us, that the decisions are on the ground and we've left it to the military commanders, versus your own perception, yours and Iqbal's perception of what the reality may be? And if it is headed towards what you all are saying, that leave it to the commanders, they know what to do. Iqbal or Maroof, any one of you can answer that first. But
let Maroof go first, then I'll answer.
Okay. Now, you see, it's a good thing if you leave matters military to military commanders, though the British Prime Minister Clemenceau once said, war is too serious a business to be left to generals. I have then argued since 26/11, national security is too serious a business in India to be left to politicians. So, however, let me sort of tell you whose responsibility begins where and ends where. If it's a tactical situation on the ground, let the commanders on the ground take a situation and sort it out. This is what I'm told Modi did after giving the go-ahead for the commando strikes after Uri attacks by Pakistan. That it's a military matter, you guys sort it out, short of war, keep it under control. And they did it. and Pakistan, and it broke a major myth with Pakistan that they can keep using the nuclear umbrella to keep attacking and pinning India and pinpricking India, and they'll get away with it. But what do you do here? The military commanders, there are chains of command. These are pretty foolproof. And, you know, it's not that one man wavers, so the next man on top of him or below him will waver also. They will, and they have a pretty ruthless system of sacking people and moving them out in the middle of an operation, like during the Kargil conflict. The division commander of 3 Div was sent home. The brigade commander of 102 Brigade was also asked to relook at his professional options. So quickly, these things get implemented. What if the situation escalates? So please understand that just because two nuclear-powered nations are facing each other and talking of push come to shove, I will get into a firing match. You don't use your nuclear weapons as your first weapon of resort. They're often like hati ke daant, dikhane ke liye, but not khane ke liye. Now, you have to use that only to signal to your adversary that if you push me into a corner, the situation could escalate where your cities will also not be safe. We have capacity now to hit many of Chinese coastal important cities from Shanghai to Beijing with the Agni 5. Now, the point is, you're not going to go that route. It's a territorial problem, and political leaders use this signaling to then come in and resolve the situation, because they don't want to close all the door and end up as hands-on managing a conflict, because A, they don't have the capacity to and capability, and two, it just becomes micromanagement, as happened in 1962 when Krishna Menon with General B.G. Kaul bypassed all the systems and was micromanaging unit, brigade, division deployment, and we saw what happened. I mean, it was a complete disaster, and the military officers stood aside and allowed them to. Now the big question is, will the military leadership in the event of a conflict allow the politicians to do micromanagement? If they do, then the nation has to ask them and boo them out of the chair they are occupying. You cannot absolve yourself of responsibility, or don't have a bloody flag on your car and go home. And the next thing is, as far as the politicians come in, it is for the politicians to lay out the broad guideline. Now, for all his other shortcomings, Vajpayee achieved something which was very important in the Kargil conflict. And that was, you know, in his, between times when he would doze off and wake up again and all that, and I've been told by this by very senior commanders, he just looked at them and he pointed at the LOC and he says, "Ise nahi cross karna hai." That means that became your biggest term of reference, that you will not cross the LOC. And what Pakistan did in Kargil, they went out to challenge the sanctity of the LOC, and the LOC around Kargil, which comes all the way to Jammu, got sanctified. So you have to now define your outer term of reference to the armed forces, that this is what you have to get back, and this is what we are willing to give and live. Now, if you do that, then the military within that term of reference, that Pahadi and this Nala, they will take care of for you what you want.
Got it. Iqbal, your quick take on this, and then I'll come to my next set of questions.
You see, my take on this is very simple, that you have a choice. The Indian state has a choice today. Either you become a subordinate power to China, or you stand up to China with the comity of other powers like the Americans, Australians, Japanese, and Vietnamese and Singaporeans, and face up to them with a strong political will. The choice is there before Mr. Modi. He has a popular mandate, overwhelming popular mandate, to bite the bullet and take the hard decisions. This period of strategic autonomy and wishy-washy non-alignment, that we must be friends with the Chinese and the Russians and the Americans, everybody's gone. There is a new Cold War defined as a Cold War based on technology. And you are going to be excluded from the American end of it if you decide to, follow the Chinese end. Now, after Depsang, there were two summits, the Wuhan summit and then the Mamallapuram summit. And why, after those two one-on-one summits, did the whole thing collapse, and why did we end up at Galwan? My understanding is that the Chinese were looking for a comprehensive solution on Kashmir and the whole state of Jammu and Kashmir, which involved the Pakistanis. And the Indian government was unwilling to do that because they had diverse domestic agendas, and they had they were uncertain of what their foreign policy agenda should be. Now, the Chinese have pushed you into a corner. If today you decide to follow the path of non-alignment and independence, you will then be retreating every time the Chinese test you. And they are not going to wait 20 years to test you. They're going to test you rapidly because time is running out and they are facing an existential crisis. If you wish to face up to them and have the political will, then you, I'm afraid, have to join the quadrilateral of democracies and gear up to face up to the Chinese. And as Maroof has explained, figure out what is the rollout of a kind of a military escalation. Some kind of an escalation is essential for the morale of the nation, and to tell these people that, look, you can't get into my house. You can't get into my house and tell me what to do. You can't say that, I'm in your garden today, tomorrow I'll be in your veranda, after that I'll be in your living room, then I'll be in your bedroom. How much are you going to pull back? And to what extent are you going to ask for disengagement and de-escalation? Disengagement and de-escalation from what? Do you want to be economically subordinate to China? Do you want to be politically subordinate to China? Do you want to be militarily subordinate to China? And do you want to be laughed at by the Pakistanis all the time? Because Pakistan today is now becoming the fifth star on the Chinese map. The Chinese map is the big star is the Han civilization. Then there are the Tibetans, the Mongolians, the Xinjiangis, and the Manchurians. And the Pakistanis are going to be the fifth star. Pakistan is a subordinate state of China. And because of the interoperability between the Pakistan armed forces and the Chinese armed forces, the Pakistani armed forces are integrated with the Chinese. Now, whether you want to accept that politically or not is your issue. Sure. So the issue is that, are you going to face up to them and you have the political mandate to do, or are you going to pull back and follow this path of appeasement and the attendant consequences that it's going to have?
Excellent. It's been 45 minutes into the call, and it's very interesting that for the first time, the Pakistani name was taken after 45 minutes of conversation on a matter which involves Jammu, Kashmir, Ladakh. And this shows how inconsequential that entire country has been, because all this while we've actually had to deal with China, and Pakistan's not the real story out here. So Maroof and Iqbal, I don't know if that's a true statement or not.
I'll just quickly put in a point here that last year, Maroof and I released our book on Kashmir, Kashmir's Untold Story Declassified.
My favorite book for now.
And at that seminar, when we released the book in the month of October, it was the 7th of October before Dussehra, I said that the elephant in the room is China.
It's China.
And China is our enemy that is going to challenge us and not Pakistan, because Pakistan is subordinate to China. Do we want to stand up to China, or do we want to be a subordinate to China like the Pakistanis have chosen? And that my assessment has turned out to be prophetic this summer.
Okay, so since we have a little bit more time, Maroof and you both referred, in fact, Maroof mentioned this in a talk a little while ago, that there are, it's not just about the military presence. How about both of you all sharing what's happening on the oceans? What about the seas? That's where the real action is, where the Chinese are maneuvering in the South China Sea. And then the Indian Navy has its own presence in the IOR. And for the viewers, can you explain that if we move away from land and start to focus on the seas, does that create an equilibrium for India? Because my understanding is that on the seas, we are on equal footing with the Chinese. And if both of you all individually can just expand on that a bit. And the challenges that the Chinese may face when it comes to the open seas.
Okay, see, I'll take this on first.
Sure.
You know, I don't think South Bloc in Delhi is discounting the Pakistan factor in China's plans. The reason is that the Chinese have built up Pakistan systematically from the 60s onwards as a counter to India.
Yes.
I just finished reading a very interesting book by Andrew Small called The China-Pakistan Nexus. It's like China-Pakistan Nexus, yeah. China-Pakistan axis. And, you know, he explains that how China has been somewhat shy and reticent of showing its deeper engagement with Pakistan, not really making state visits by heads of government, not really standing together hand in hand and making a whole lot of loud pronouncements. But on the other hand, China's control over Pakistan is almost complete with the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, with the Chinese funding of Gwadar Port, China's designs of providing Pakistan's military with top-end Chinese missiles, aircrafts, and now you brought out the naval question. They've just sanctioned the supply of more frigates and submarines to Pakistan, when the attention China should be giving clearly to its own naval might. Now, where does it stand on the maritime score? By 2025 or so, China would probably have the biggest navy in the world. It's edging towards that, and it would be a fairly modern navy. But right now, in terms of capacities and ability to respond to challenges in a Sino-Indian context, the Indian Navy is much better off. The last naval chief, Admiral Lamba, made a statement: for the Indian Navy, there is only one theater of operation, and that is the Indian Ocean, which means Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea, Indian Ocean, everything. Now, the Chinese are actually on 3 fronts out there, clearly on 2 fronts, and maybe a 3rd front could open up for them very quickly if India decides to. One is in the Sea of Taiwan and all the deployments they're doing around Taiwan to browbeat the Taiwanese, and the American aircraft carrier groups are already there. And aircraft carrier groups don't operate in isolation. The aircraft carrier is like a kind of monarch, which is surrounded by a lot of other ships, submarines, helicopter groups, etc., etc. And there is one American aircraft carrier group which is in the South China Sea, where China has been for long claiming places like the Paracel Islands, the Spratly Islands, and even the EEZ of Vietnam, Philippines. All of them are not friends of China. And then there is another Chinese, American carrier group carrying helicopter forces. So that's not being counted as part of aircraft carrier group, but that's another 4th one which is there. And one is moving in towards the Indian Ocean side for this exercises that we are planning called the Malabar exercises. Strangely, the Malabar coast is actually the coast which is along the Arabian Sea. This is the Coromandel coast, but somehow they got this name Malabar, and Malabar exercises remain to be happening in the Bay of Bengal. So we have force levels, and the easiest thing for us to do is to block the Straits of Malacca, which is the waterway between Malaysia, Singapore, and the Indonesian islands of, where Sumatra, Java, all that is, and just stop Chinese energy lines coming from the Straits of Hormuz in the Gulf region right through the Indian Ocean, south of Sri Lanka, and they go in here and head for China with energy lines. Now, in the long term, China has planned multiple ports, which is going to give it the chance to get energy and trade directly from the African and Gulf regions via having now they're talking to the Iranians for a major engagement with Iran and investments there. The figures are being inflated, but they'll still put quite a few billions in there to make a good port. We've invested in Iran in the Chabahar port. China has also already got the Gwadar port, which is just next to Karachi, between Karachi and Iran. China has also got the Sitwe port, which is in Burma. They've also got an engagement now with Bangladesh for Cox's Bazar. So that could be another port. We've also got port facilities, which ranges from a massive landmass, which is with us, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. We have to understand the strategic usage of that and not be myopic and keep focusing on the land borders. As I told you, pressure on the land border, put pressure on the sea, land border pressure it ceases. But what can Pakistan bring to bear for China if China and India decide to just keep it as a territorial standoff in around the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir? So Pakistan can be a massive nuisance factor in the LOC. But interestingly, the Pakistan Army chief has just written orders to, and Pakistan Army chief can even give a death sentence to people. So he's not like your Indian Army chief. You know, he's really, he's in the hierarchy, he's probably the most important man in Pakistan. So he has written to the Home Minister and the medical authorities of POK to give 50% of the beds in the hospital for Pakistan Army, because they expect that if they push India too hard, India is going to hit them so hard across the LOC that they'll have a lot of wounded and dead to care for in the POK area, which is the hangout for all the jihadis. The Pakistan Army would be looking at trying to extract our resources in the Rajasthan-Gujarat border. But clearly, our deployments are such that, you know, in a crisis with China, unlike in '65, where you pushed out troops from Punjab into China border thinking China is going to attack you in the '65 war. And so Abdul Hamid and gang fought with lieutenants and captains as their commanders when they should have had majors and colonels. Now there are full-fledged divisions called rapid divisions, which are deployed on the Rajasthan-Gujarat border. And believe me, Pakistan's very uneasy about those divisions, because in a 72 hours, much of Western Pakistan, where parts of Eastern Pakistan, which borders Western India, would be gone to Pakistan. So that those plans are in place. Pakistan doesn't have a deterrent except threatening with nuclear bombs. Nuclear bombs will not be used. That is my belief. Because when you do that, then you can't stop the escalation cycle, because it becomes force, counter force, counter force, and therefore things go completely out of hand. So to put it in short, Pakistan factor has been built in by the Chinese. But remember, after 1962, in all the wars with India, 65, 71 and Kargil, the Chinese did not physically do anything to distract the Indian army sufficiently so that it wouldn't give Pakistan a suitable hammering. So the Indian army, if it was distracted in its own mind, not because what the Chinese did. And so therefore Pakistan may say, kind of do a quid pro quo and say, because there are other patrons in the Gulf countries who had asked Pakistan's involvement in the Yemen shootout, where they wanted Pakistan to provide for forces. Pakistan has been living off handouts from them for decades, and suddenly said, you know, it really doesn't suit us to get involved because we also have Shia troops and Sunni troops and there'll be conflict between. But it was really an exit strategy that Pakistan used. But UAE in particular warned them that they'll have to pay for it. So Pakistan is not a very reliable ally, but it expects its other allies to be consistently in its support. America first, now China now. What we have to bother about, that there is a China-Pak dimension. Our strength lies in the maritime option, which I believe we should have rolled out a month ago and start blocking their ships. ये सब झंझट ही नहीं होता that they will withdraw in a calibrated manner and the withdrawal will take place over until the thing. What we are also counting on, by the way, is Colonel Winter. So when Colonel Winter comes by September, and the Chinese troops will find it very difficult to stay out on those freezing heights. Our guys have been there, they're acclimatized. China has an oxygen problem there. China has lots of restrictions in snow. So maybe we just want to keep them and let them die in the cold. Maybe that might be a strategy. I'm not privy to it, but if I had a chance to advise the government, I would say, use that as an option. Stretch it out, you know,
charger lao jaldi se or remove.
And do to them what they've done with the rest of the world, that they will only talk to you but keep the pot boiling and take 40, 50, 70 years to resolve a problem which is resolvable. But having said that, India is also at fault. India has not really seriously addressed the problem of settling the boundary. I don't know what these 25 high-level meetings were all about. Probably part sightseeing and part dinner and part talks.
Karan, I'll just put in my bit on this whole issue. Earlier this week, the Chinese and the Iranians went into a major deal for the building of this Chabahar railway, and they also went into this deal for what you call buying about $400 billion worth of Iranian oil over a 20-year period, and they will in turn sell armaments and other things to the Iranians. Now, as you know, there are 3 choke points in the Indian Ocean. One is the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, which is from where the Saudi oil flows into the Indian Ocean from Dhahran, and the other is the Strait of Hormuz, and the third is the Strait of Malacca. Now, the Chinese, with this deal with the Iranians, are seeking to dominate the Strait of Hormuz and edge out the Americans who have a base there in Bahrain. We need to rapidly, I feel, this is my view, scale up this alliance of the quadrilateral of democracies and get it into a kind of a southern NATO, whereby you have a situation where you have a secretariat and it's a southern, it's like not a southern, but an Asian NATO. And you need to immediately move your army, navy and deploy and dominate the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb and the Strait of Malacca, and be in a position to interdict Chinese shipping. Secondly, you see the domain of the Indian Navy extends from Cape Town to Vladivostok, and this is what the Admiral, I think his name was Admiral Robin Dhawan, said in a speech in 2014 or 15. I was listening to it. And that is our area of domination. Now, we need to spend more money on our maritime strength and our maritime deployment. And that is an imperative. And we are the army is sufficiently well equipped. I don't think we need to spend more money on our land forces, because it is going to be counterproductive, and that's what the Chinese want us to do. So I think the Navy needs to be strengthened, and our naval alliance with Japan, the US and Australia needs to be formalized. And let it be a military alliance. What's wrong with it? Because China has a military alliance with Pakistan. It's getting into alliance with Iran. It has a military alliance with North Korea. Why can't we defend ourselves with our friends? Why should we be bashful about it? Why should we be shy and diffident? Call a spade a spade.
So the point you're making, Iqbal, is the time for a non-aligned country like India, that time is coming to an end, and then you'd rather get yourself with the quad of democracy, show your strength, and be in a position to push back. We are now coming to the top of an hour, and what I'll do is maybe ask you and Maroof to kind of give your closing remarks, and then there are a few questions that are starting to pop up are a few questions. And so just as a quick summary on what you all have spoken, Iqbal, you spoke about the matters around resources, and Maroof spoke about the options that we have as a country. So if you all can just sum it up in the next 4 to 5 minutes, after which I can take a few questions. Maroof, you want to start?
Iqbal's just to sort something out. So a couple of things. One is the problem is a territorial issue, and the solutions don't lie in counting the kilometers and miles of Chinese incursions. The solutions lie in finding how to address the problem, which has to be addressed in 3 or 4 ways. One is actually immediately use your maritime options to de-escalate Chinese pressure on you. I mean, that's a simple military logic. Everywhere in the world it's applied, that you get pressure at one place, you put pressure elsewhere, and this pressure decreases. The second is, do you go for harsher economic measures against China? If you are you as a country and your citizens willing to make the kind of sacrifices that suddenly a blockage of cheap Chinese equipment would impose on you. And not so much as you, but all the others, your support elements, from your staff in your offices to your drivers and the restaurant waiter and everybody, because everyone's got addicted to Chinese cheap technology. The third is that, is this now given that till China gets all of Aksai Chin and up northwards, Galwan north, head towards Depsang Valley, take that over, take on the Daulat Beg Oldie, highest airfield north of India and probably highest in the world, and move towards connecting with the Karakoram Pass and the Shaksgam Valley region. If China wants to do that, and China has been making moves in that area, are you prepared for a greater confrontation or not? There are implications, but there are benefits also that will kind of give China a wake-up call for many, many years. And finally, and most importantly, what should be your new strategic approach by dealing with the two-front challenge that you face, both by China and Pakistan? Gone are the days that you can keep hammering Pakistan because that's a winnable war across the LOC or wherever else, and keep talking to Pakistan because Nehru told you that way out. So those are the options that need to be looked at. The rest of it, of course, we've explained in detail what we talked about. Iqbal, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. No, my battery is suddenly almost dying, so I had to shift. Yeah, sorry. Please ask me the question again. I was a bit distracted with the...
So, Iqbal, you're closing... no worries. Your closing remarks, and then there are a set of some 7-8 questions that are popped up on the screen, which I'll kind of just go through. Iqbal, if you can just summarize your take.
My take on this is this, that the Chinese are on a roll. They are not going to stop because the Chinese economy is under a great deal of pressure. And there is a pressure on Xi to deliver on his promises if he wishes to remain as president for life. So I feel that the Chinese are convinced that Mr. Modi is not going to submit to their wishes, and he is not going to submit to a subordinate relationship with China, and therefore he has to be pushed into it. And I feel that they will definitely be a resurgence of this escalation on the ground. And we should be prepared, as Maroof said, to take countermeasures in the seas. We need to firm up our alliance with the United States. We need to get covered under their Pacific Deterrence Initiative, which enables us access to ammunition and weaponry at cheaper rates. The US should be convinced not to allow India, not to look at India as a market for the defense equipment, but as an ally. And, so we need to equip ourselves and have our strategy in place, because I don't think the Chinese are going to stop, because they've had an erosion of their goodwill in India. It's down to rock bottom. People are all anti-Chinese, and they are wary of buying Chinese products and looking at Chinese brands. Secondly, the Chinese have lost face, tremendous loss of face. And for them, it's again an issue that, look, we better get what we can start to achieve. And they're not going to stop, because I think the water issue is very crucial for them. And they've waited long enough, and they've prepared well enough, and they're going to face up to the consequences. Now, they don't have to start a kinetic war. They can start an electromagnetic war. They can start a space war. They can start a cyber war. They can try and take out our power system, the banking system, without firing a shot, and wait for us to start the kinetic war. So we need to
what happened with Australia.
We need to war game it and see how are we going to face up to this Chinese thrust. And that thrust is I feel, is around the corner in more ways than one.
Correct. So I've got a list of about 7 or 8 questions. What I'll do is I'll just take them one by one, and I can start with you, Iqbal, and then we can
Yeah.
go to Maroof. Iqbal, the first question comes from Jigar. His question is: the U.S., the Japanese, Australians, Taiwanese, and the Indians can kind of come together, and they've kind of formed the Quad, so to speak, and something that you and Maroof alluded to. Does that contain the Chinese ambitions? Is that a powerful force between the 5 nations, or at least the 4 nations? Is that powerful enough to contain the Chinese?
It is a powerful force, and it is enough to contain the Chinese, because let's look at it. These are all the markets for Chinese products. And also, these are the people who have the political will. The Taiwanese have the will. They are very plucky. The Japanese have the will. They are very plucky. They've been restrained because their defense service, their constitution was pacifist. Now Abe is embarked on a process of rearmament. The Australian military budget has been bumped up by 40%. It's high time we did the same. Our military budget has really come down under Mr. Modi to under 2% of GDP.
In fact, on that point, I had a question from Vishal. Exactly the point that you're making, Iqbal, that the Australians have hiked their defense budgets, and you're making the point. So you can answer that question as well, because it's part of the same question.
Yeah, I think
what is your view on that?
My view is this, that we form a formidable Quad, and this Quad should be scaled up, as I said earlier on, and we should get cracking in containing the Chinese, because look, they're an adversary. This is a challenge. Even Lord Krishna told Karan in the battlefield of the Mahabharata that it is your reaction to the challenge that the Almighty is looking at. And how are you going to react to it is what is important. So it's the Chinese are looking at our reactions. And if he's threatening us, he's a bully. You got to call his bluff.
Right. So Maroof, I have this quick question from Ankit. He framed it beautifully, but I'm just kind of making it very short. His simple, he had a long question, but his simple question is: are we losing our neighbors? We've seen that happening with Nepal. We've also seen that happening around the neighborhood. So his concern is: do you agree that we may be starting to lose some of our neighbors, Maroof?
Well, I think my understanding is we probably have only a half friend in one of our neighbors. The rest of them are all lost. Pakistan was a dead end from the very beginning. Maldives, we have them being bought out by the Chinese, and then us being saved by the bell, as it were, with an election that throws up a new president who, for the moment, says he continues to bank on India. But I don't think you can avoid China's deep pockets and the lure of Chinese investment in your country. Sri Lanka, I mean, whatever the visit by the new president to India may mean, but his brother almost sold the country off to Sri Lanka. Hambantota port is gone to the Chinese. More will go. Colombo is really being developed as another Chinese city in the Indian Ocean. You go further as the clock goes anti-clockwise to Sitwe, Burma. Yes, the Chinese have made massive investments in Burma in terms of a oil pipeline and various other port and infrastructural investments. I'm told in the range of $32 billion. That you can keep having goodwill visits by our ministers there, but clearly China is looking at how Burma can be another source of pumping up energy and various other things from its ports right to Southeast China. And then you have Bhutan, who has generally stayed with India very steadily. But, Bhutan is under a lot of pressure. After the Doklam standoff, we moved away from there. And the Chinese quietly came in, perched themselves, and now have started encroaching on Bhutanese territory. And India is being asked, are you willing to stand in for us again? Because India has a military training team in Bhutan, Imtrat. Or are you going to allow us to battle with the Chinese in whatever limited way we can? So you have a problem there, because grazing land issues vis-a-vis important territorial issues, they are being discussed between Bhutan and China about give and take. Nepal, you've been reading the news, they're almost gone, or it's gone. For too long, our foreign service has continued to give us this nonsense that India has historical ties with these countries. The Prime Minister made his first prime ministerial visit to Nepal. But why did we allow it to go the other way? Because China comes in with deep pockets. You know, we are so foolish that I have always objected to our putting money into Afghanistan. We are not cash rich, but we still put $2 billion there. The Prime Minister goes there, Mr. Modi goes there, and then on the advice of people, promises another $1 billion worth of infrastructural investments. I mean, imagine if you had put $1 billion each in Nepal and Bangladesh, they'd be eating out of your hand. If you can gift it to Afghanistan, what stops you from gifting it here? Why do you want to link it to, okay, we'll give you some trade concessions here and there? I mean, Afghanistan is, I'm sorry to say, is a dead end. You know, it's a basket which has a big hole at the bottom of it. It doesn't have any system by which funding can be assured. I've told the Americans in more than one occasion, they went into the wrong country at the wrong time after 9/11. Had they gone in with their money to Pakistan and told the generals that we pay you 1/10 of what we are going to put into Afghanistan, but you sort the problem out for us, Pakistan's army would have been only happy to go and do that. And we are going and putting a bloody neck in Afghanistan because we want to finger Pakistan from the other side. You know, please understand that we have, I don't know what our foreign policy mandarins have based their thinking on, but it's certainly not on logic.
Okay. I have an interesting question that's coming from Yashvi Lat. And Iqbal, if you could take this. I think we've not spoken much about the Russian angle in this in the triad. So the Russian angle between the Indian and the Chinese, what's your view on that? And where do they stand in this entire sequence? That's one. And the CPEC is a connected question. Is that a challenge and it's a construction for India? So we'll take the first part first. What is the Russian?
Well, actually, let's put it this way. I'll put it this way rather, that the Russian angle is Putin's angle. Now, Putin views China as a counterweight to the US, and Putin views India as a counterweight to the Chinese. So as far as Putin is concerned, as long as the US keeps up pressure on the Chinese, he's happy, because it deflects attention from the Chinese towards Russia. And as long as he can prop India up to face up to the Chinese, he's happy, because the Chinese are bogged down on the one side by the Americans and the other side by the Chinese. So Putin is selling arms to both India and China, and he is playing this game of politics. And the issue is that there are about 5 million Chinese who are illegal immigrants in Siberia, and they have settled there. And that is a big existential problem that the Russians are going to face at some point in the future. And Putin doesn't know what to do with that, because he's got this Chinese investment in Siberia, but he's got this kind of fifth column over there. So I think he's left it to a later date when he'll deal with it. So if you look at history, in 1949, December, Stalin pushed Mao into invading Aksai Chin because he wanted the mineral resources of Aksai Chin. And Khrushchev used Mao's support in the Bay of Pigs crisis in Cuba. And he pledged support to China when they invaded India. And after the de-escalation took place in the Caribbean, he immediately changed his stance, and then he turned his back on China. So for about 3 weeks, the Russians were pro-Chinese, and after that, they became pro-Indian. So, I mean, you know, the Russians are fair weather friends. They're a trusted ally. They supply us with arms. And we can't expect anything more from them, because they're going to look at their national interests, not ours. And the second part of the question was...
CPEC. CPEC and the construction, and do you see that as a threat?
The CPEC is really an alternate to the Strait of Malacca, because the Chinese were anticipating that at some point of time, the Americans and the Indians and the Japanese will get together and they will block our shipping. So we need alternate route to transport the oil and the natural gas into Xinjiang, into Western China. So the CPEC is that. Secondly, they wanted access to the Indian Ocean to outflank India, and by making Pakistan into a subordinate province, they have achieved that. The CPEC is very interesting, that a 20-kilometer, 10 kilometers on either side of the CPEC that entire area from the Indian Ocean all the way up to Xinjiang is going to be a dual currency area. It already is a dual currency area, Pakistan rupee and Chinese yuan. Now, the Pakistan rupee is a monopoly currency today. And ultimately, the Chinese yuan is going to become legal tender in Pakistan, and it will start to being used in commerce. So you will find that Pakistan is now slowly integrating. That's the choice they've made into the greater Chinese ambit. So I don't think that the CPEC is a problem to us. It's a Chinese strategic decision. It's their territory. They are going through POK, which we have not asserted our rights to get it. Even in 1971, Mrs. Gandhi pulled back because the story goes that the Russian ambassador came to her with photographs showing the Shah of Iran moving 5 divisions to the Iran-Balochistan border because the Indian army was expected to go up to the east bank of the Indus River from Hyderabad, Sindh, when the Indian army is supposed to cut through there. And he said that you will find that you will meet the Iranian army on the west bank of the Indus. So, Mrs. Gandhi, do you want to have Iran as your neighbor, or do you want a buffer of Pakistan? And I don't know what else transpired, but this was in Tariq Ali's, one of his books, which I read about 35 years ago. And they say that that's why Mrs. Gandhi unilaterally called the ceasefire in the Western region. Otherwise, at that point of time, we could have got back POK.
Which is a question many times people do ask. I'm going to end with one last question. It comes from Deepak Jain. It's a question which is about Kulbhushan Yadav. And Maroof, maybe you could take this on. Why can't we get Kulbhushan just like the way we got Abhinandan back? Any take on that? Or Iqbal, if you have a view on that, any one of you can take it. And I think we can take that as a last question.
Let Maroof take that question.
Okay.
Maroof, what about Kulbhushan? Do we have a chance?
Kulbhushan, I've been speaking about it on television this week, last week. See, Kulbhushan Yadav is kind of a puppet that Pakistan has been using to make several points to India. One is that ever since Manmohan Singh, with his then Foreign Secretary, later National Security Advisor Shiv Shankar Menon, made that Sharm el-Sheikh fiasco of drafting, where they added in the joint statement between India and Pakistan that India will not interfere in Balochistan, therefore giving kind of support to a Pakistani myth that India was interfering in Balochistan. But in reality, actually, Pakistan's had a mess on its hands with Balochistan ever since March 1948, when the Khan of Kalat refused to first come on board with Jinnah. Jinnah used to be his personal secretary. Later, Jinnah became head of state, and the Baloch leader had to suffer him with all his arrogance that Jinnah used to exude. So there were tensions between Pakistan and Balochistan. There are ongoing tensions. Pakistan exploits all the natural resources from there, including gas from the Sui gas fields and other fields. All goes to the Punjabis in Punjab in Pakistan. It has been very harsh with the Balochis. It's worth reading a book by Akbar Ahmed, the Pakistani scholar and ambassador to Washington and High Commissioner to London, and now scholar in the US, The Thistle and the Drone, and is the story of how the Balochis have had to fight with all these attacks on them. Kulbhushan Yadav was kidnapped from Chabahar. I think I don't know whether he made a mistake or that was planted on him, a passport with a Muslim name when he was clearly a retired officer from the Navy, not a serving officer. Two, Pakistan seems to believe that a naval officer with a technical background could be a Lawrence of Arabia in the deserts of Balochistan and incite a full-blooded insurgency when the insurgency already existed before even Kulbhushan Yadav was born, 48. The third thing is they were trying to use him to get India to talk to them and engage with them on their terms. But India kind of stumped them by taking the issue to the International Court of Justice, where interestingly, the wig-wearing barrister who argued for Pakistan has later gone on record to say that, Pakistan is a hopeless case in so many ways. So, and of course, he lost the debate with Mr. Salve. And now, finally, what is it that India can do? You know, India can keep up pressure on Pakistan, but India can't do kind of Bin Laden thing to get Kulbhushan Jadhav back, because I'll be very blunt, he's not as precious as Bin Laden was to the entire American narrative. Two, it's not that India will abandon him, but it's not the first time that an Indian has been taken prisoner by Pakistan. And there are more than 54 prisoners of India from the wars, which Pakistan never admitted to taking. Their families still wait with their photographs. There is a book that I was just received from an author who just sent it to me, Chandrasuta Dogra. It's called Missing in Action. And they're waiting for some good to come out of whatever little Indian assurances that come to the family, which is so little and so few that it's negligible. So don't expect too much out of it. And India, you know, the problem is that either you are a superpower or you have to get a superpower to put pressure on a country like Pakistan, because we don't really have too many leverages on them. Yes, we do talk about exercising control of the Indus River systems, but quite clearly, even between Kargil and post-Kargil, when we decided to use that as an option before commando raids and found those options are not really viable, I don't think we've really moved forward in our ability to exercise those options. So choices are few, but Pakistan has to be repeatedly reminded that if it wants to be a member of the international community and be respected as a half-decent nation, then it has to follow Vienna Convention 36(1), which insists that India should get consular access to Yadav, to be able to speak to him in privacy, to understand that he's not become a member of the Pakistani establishment because of the Stockholm Syndrome, which gets the prisoners to like their captors more than their own countrymen. And all those options are being explored. But, you know, as I always argue, that it's pretty much lower in the hierarchy of India's priorities when dealing with Pakistan. Yes, what we can really exercise with Pakistan, that since you're not giving us consular access to Kulbhushan Jadhav, we want to shut down our embassy. What is the point of having our embassy or high commission there if we can't even engage with prisoners of Indian nationality? And Sushma Swaraj, as a foreign minister, had gone on record to say he's an Indian citizen and a retired naval officer. It's not very often that the Indian establishment owns up to everybody from India who becomes a prisoner in Pakistan. But that is one trump card we can play. And I think they'll be a bit cornered by that. I think this reduction of the embassy by 50% is really neither there nor there, because you still give Pakistan the choice of having 50% of the original staff, which is about 50 odd people, of which I'm sure 45 must be spies in India and 5 must be doing the usual paperwork.
Got it. I have had a fascinating 1.5 hours with the two of you all, Maroof and Iqbal. And in fact, I'm looking forward to the next book that you all are coming out with, Red Fear, which is the Chinese, it's all about what your views are together.
Can you show the slide of the Red Fear on your screen to the viewers? There's a slide.
I think you have that, yeah. When does this come out, Iqbal?
It's coming out on the 18th of September this year.
Okay, so I'm going to get my advance copy today itself. And I'd suggest that everyone on the call definitely have a look at this, because the two gentlemen have put this together and you can see that their insights are deep into this topic. And I have learned a lot today. Thank you so much for taking time out and for talking to us. Abhinav, thanks for putting this together.
Thank you for having us here, Karan and Abhinav and Maroof.
I really enjoyed. And the thing is that you all have made an effort to explain such detail, because it's taken over 30 years, 40 years of research, putting it all together, and to try and crunch this down into an hour is not easy. So thanks a lot.
Most welcome. Pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. And do pick up this book from Amazon, Kashmir's Untold Story, declassified. It's I think it's the best 500 rupee investment you can make.
Yeah, I love the book.
And by the way, we are coming out with a revised and updated edition of Kashmir's Untold Story Declassified. which will probably be in the bookshops by the end of November this year.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your time. And I'll request all the participants to please pick up this book.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Maroof. Bye,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Abhinav.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.